Almost every country is in debt. While the United States faces the largest debt crisis in history at over $38 trillion, the European Union has reached $14 trillion, and Japan holds $9 trillion in debt. Even countries like Saudi Arabia, which cracked the code of making money from oil, or export masters like Germany and China, are struggling with debts. So, what is the problem here? With so much debt, who is going to pay what? Debt is not actually a weight. It is a tool of today's world. Wars, crises, collapses, and the subsequent rises are the reasons for these hidden promissory notes. If we wanted to check every state's creditor in a relationship table, we would realize that the debt does not belong to anyone in particular. In fact, the world does not owe us. We owe the world. Even if we owe the world, it wouldn't be accurate to say this debt is distributed equally. While total global debt has seen levels of $315 trillion, which can be described as more than 3 times the global economy, we must go back to the very beginning of digital history to grasp how we reached this point. Centuries ago, we didn't have today's exchange technologies like digital transfers or credit cards. Nations found mutual debt not as in a Wall Street movie, but in war arenas. For example, in the war between England and France in 1694, England was suffering from a lack of gold. The king sought financial aid from merchants in exchange for repayment with interest. Additionally, these merchants would be exempt from future taxes. For the king to manage this financial innovation in a regulated environment, the Bank of England was established. This was a revolution for the state. The state was eating the apple without having the tree. In other words, non-existent money was being spent. In such a period, those who lent to the state gained a profit more valuable than money: power. This was the beginning of the government bond, one of the greatest treasures of modern finance. Seeing England's situation, France applied this in its own country. The Netherlands moved this system forward, and the U.S., having just gained its independence, used this system to create financial power on its path to westward expansion. Let's return from the past to the present. Debt has turned into a pawn of export. The world's debt increases by $10 billion every day, which is an incredible statistic. Earnings, taxes, savings. But at the end of the day, every human has both debts and receivables. In such a situation, how is the balance maintained? For instance, when we look at America, 50% of its debt comes from the public. In such a case, the other half is from aid requested from investors. When we categorize the investors themselves, nearly 66.6% are U.S.-based, while the remaining portion belongs to foreigners, reaching nearly $9 trillion. When looking at the countries America owes the most, Japan and China lead the way with $1 trillion and $800 billion, respectively. Consequently, while watching news channels that scare viewers by saying, "The U.S. owes China so much," one must teach people that this debt only covers 2% of total U.S. debt. Yes, America is in debt, but it is mostly indebted to its own citizens, and there is an invisible mirror here. The large share of the debt cycle generally occurs within the society itself. Generally, this cycle is not a special situation seen only in the U.S. It is a global phenomenon. Japan, benefiting from the treasury bonds, lends to America this way. America, thanks to the IMF, closes its debt to Europe. Europe, in turn, connects its decreasing debt with the World Bank to lend to third world countries. Third world countries, namely developing nations, play a key role in causing this money to return to the start. Developing countries want to invest their foreign exchange into Western bonds, and thus powerful economies become indebted again. Imagine a village in your mind. There is a restaurant in the village and everyone serves each other, but no one has cash. Let's say there is a baker, a restaurateur, and a butcher. The baker eats a very nice meal and needs to pay $40, but since he has no money on him, he gives the restaurateur a paper that says, "I owe $40, you can come to me and buy bread with this." The restaurateur does not want to buy bread. Instead, he wants to buy meat from the butcher, so he gives the note he got from the baker to the butcher. At the end of the day, the butcher can now get bread from the baker. The butcher then goes and gives this note to the farmer in exchange for feed. Finally, the farmer gives this note to the baker and gets bread. So, what does this event tell us? In the end, the baker's own note came back to him, and it seems like his debt is closed. Is it really? The actual situation is this. That paper went from hand to hand and caused exactly $80 worth of trade to circulate in the village. Even if the note itself is a debt, the system used this note exactly like money, and the debt did not stay in anyone's hands for long. What keeps the entire order alive in trade is actually the fact that no one's debt is eternal. What we call debt consists of a chain reaction cycle. However, while the quantity of debt remains the same, its quality may vary. Behind the market sit giant institutions like hedge funds, pension funds, and central banks. They are the true arbiters of credit. They decide which nation will borrow cheaply and which will pay a heavy price to survive. The high priest of the modern system is the central bank. Central banks do not just manage debt, they manufacture it. Every dollar has an invisible IOU engraved on it. There is no such thing as debt-free money. Every digital dollar represents a unit of debt somewhere else. In the 21st century, debt is not actually given with the intention of being repaid. It is designed to be rolled over with newer debts. The goal of states has never been to reduce their debt to zero. This is not a myth. It is a vision and a policy. For example, if Washington suddenly wanted to pay off all its debt, world markets would lose their most stable assets. The supply of money would decrease unimaginably, and a danger of collapse along with deflation would emerge. But why? Money can be used as a surreal tool thanks to debt. Paying off debt eliminates the functioning structure of the economy. Therefore, as debt is paid off, the veins of the capitalist system gradually become clogged, and it is natural for us to see rhythm disturbances in the heartbeat. Debt is an economic tool used not to be paid, but to be transferred. In conclusion, is debt a matter of trust or a cycle of deception? When businessmen or politicians give promises of stabilizing the budget or bringing debt nearly to zero, they are not giving honest promises. The goal was never to eliminate the debt. The goal was to increase the supply of the debt and spread it over the long term. Because if faith in the internal institution is lost even once, then none of the numbers discussed will have any meaning. Just like the Spanish government in the series Money Heist, La Casa de Papel, acting as if there is still gold in the vault so no one knows about the heist. The value talked about creates supply more than the physical value of money. Although debt is sometimes mentioned as something that is paid off and finished within itself, added interest changes this situation completely. There is a flow from those who must pay taxes to the organizations that hold debt and create supply, and from there to the highest segments of society. In other words, debt is not just a global transfer network. It is a transfer tool that also creates class inequality. Debt used to be something that looked dangerous and made people feel trapped. Now it has started to become the tool that provides the entire balance. If this created balance breaks, the ugly face of society's relationship with debt will emerge. No promise can be kept forever,